What is going on? Welcome to the episode. Today's episode is all about betterment and emotional health, personal growth, all that good stuff. And I actually have my high school girlfriend on the show today. Now, she is one of my favorite people on the planet. We have stayed in touch after all these years. I absolutely adore her, and she is super skilled in this whole personal growth space. So we decided to have a chat on the podcast. I think that you guys are going to love this one. We delved into a number of different topics, such as what's the difference between breath work and meditation? Hint, hint, there is no difference. How to start your personal growth journey, where people pleasing comes from, how experiences are stored in the body. We dig into accountability versus the blame game. Is it actually more difficult to change as you get older? We address that. The balance between science and spirit, as well as looking at masculinity versus femininity. So we dive into a whole bunch of stuff in this episode. I hope you enjoy it. Oh, and one last thing, we do talk about something called Vipassana, and that is a 10-day silent meditation retreat. I just wanted to get that definition out of the way because we didn't define it in the episode. Danette actually did it first, then recommended that I go, and I talked about it on the podcast in an episode, which I believe is called That Time I Didn't Talk for 10 Days or something like that. So if you're interested in delving into more detail into Vipassana specifically, check that episode out. But I just wanted to define that before we dig into this one. Enjoy it. When someone asks you now what you do for a living, what do you say?
Oh, it's I don't think it's ever the same, actually. I'm still trying to figure that out. I'm still trying to fine tune it and find the word that I think works for me. I've been resorting to coach because it's a thing that everyone actually understands, and I'm not trying to confuse people. But I still have a connotation with that word that it doesn't totally fit what I feel I do. I've used the word guide as well, and I like that more, but I think it can be confusing for people. So I'm a meditation guide and a wellness coach.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, it is tough to nail something down that doesn't pigeonhole you, but also explains what you actually do, because it can be so vague where someone's just like, but what do you do on a day-to-day basis?
So right now, I mean, I have it on my Instagram because I just kind of changed my what's it called? Marketing or whatever, branding. Lifestyle and leadership coach or performance and wellness coach. Either one works for me.
Got it. Okay. So before we started recording, we talked a little bit about breath work, and then we stopped because I wanted to catch this stuff on audio. So I did my first breathwork class just the other night here in Tulum, and it was super interesting. I'd never done formal breath work. I've done a bunch of meditation. You introduced me to Vipassana, stuff like that, but I'd never done formal breath work. And it was really interesting, the things that came up. It was very similar to meditation for me personally. There wasn't a ton of guiding throughout the session by the teacher, but there was a lot of music. There was a bunch of different sounds. He was playing different instruments, and it was in this dome here in Tulum at this hotel called Holistica. And so I got in there and I noticed all of these interesting things coming up for me. But before I get into that, you mentioned that breathwork has been huge for you and something that you've implemented lately. So how's that been?
So yes, it's funny that you say it just felt like meditation, because I don't think there's a difference. And I hesitate to say that on recording because I really like the idea that people can hear breath work and get excited about it and end up meditating. So my experience for the last, I guess, 12 years that I've been meditating, but then 5 years that I've been actually trying to share it with others and have them meditate and guide meditation, it is so taboo. I don't know, that's not the right word for it, but there's so many triggers around that word, and people have so many guards up and ideas about it and perceptions that really block them from giving it a solid try, right? And so that's where I really love the idea of rebranding meditation and calling it breathwork. Because yeah, it's the same thing. There's no difference.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's the exact same thing. And I had a friend that invited me to the class. And before they started the class, the teacher asked, "Oh, has anybody in here done breath work?" And I thought to myself, I have, but not formally. And then I asked my friend afterwards, I was like, "Do people consider meditation breath work or not?" And she's like, "No, it's different." And I was like, in my head, I'm like, "No, it's fucking not."
Oh, we're so funny with these labels and like whatever. Yeah, I mean, you're focusing on your breath, and that's the exact definition of meditation. And it brings calm, it brings, can bring emotional releasing or purging. You can bring focus, clarity, all the same benefits of meditation happen with breath work. And in Vipassana, there's a technique that you're using with your focus, but it's all centered around the breath.
Right.
For 3.5 days, in the first 3.5 days of the 10-day retreat, you're focusing, and I'm only saying this for your listeners, you've done it, but you're doing the Anapana breathing technique, which is just awareness of your natural breath as it is, coming in and out of the nostrils. And that's breath work for 3.5 days. And then that's the foundation of the actual Vipassana scanning body technique, which again, it's all about the breath. And yeah, it's wild because I'm becoming really, really excited about, I don't care if people want to not call it meditation. Great, fine, do that, because I'd rather people just focus on breath work and learn how to breathe and learn the benefits of it than get hung up on the words or what it is labeled as. So I'm actually diving more and more into breath work, so that and getting certified actually as we speak, so that I can offer that as a tool for people and not call it meditation anymore.
Yeah, 100%. There's so much around that word. There's a lot of people get charged around meditation. They think that they have to sit cross-legged, with their like hands in a certain position and all sorts of funky stuff. And it's like, I think that I've had meditative-like experiences playing sports. I've had meditative-like experiences walking on a daily basis, like listening to music. There are 1,000,001 ways to do it, and it doesn't have to be in this fixed position sitting like a Buddha,
Exactly. Yeah, agreed.
Have you implemented this breathwork thing, or what's your meditation practice like on a day-to-day basis? Call it whatever.
Yeah, I joke all the time with people that I'm guiding in meditation that I still don't like meditating. I still don't get excited about it. I still don't have a solid routine even with it. Yeah, so, and I say that because I want everyone out there to really feel like that's normal, because it is, and that it's not gonna ever feel perfect or ever feel set and manageable and all of that. It's dynamic. Sometimes are really harder than others. I personally have found that my flow with it is what I like, which means flexibility. Some people want regimented timing, and I like pockets of it, meditation. And again, like you said, I feel I am living meditatively in a lot of ways, and I will practice it in my movements and in my tasks. And I do experience that I'm in a meditative state when I talk to clients, which is a big portion of my day, because I'm constantly staying present, grounded, aware, active listening. Like all of that is meditative. So, if I'm just sitting in a more traditional meditation, that's probably only like 15 minutes a day right now. So yeah, I just really promote people finding their own routine, their own style, and even like the style of meditation is there's so many different ones. So really taking your time to explore, whether you want to call it breathwork, like we're saying, or it's when you go swimming, I do think there's value in sitting still. I really do. I think that we all need a time where we can just feel what our body feels like when we're not moving. And so I'm not saying that meditation should never be still, but it also can look so many different ways. So again, like you said, pigeonholing, there's us. and just distracts us from what's important. It's just trying it out, doing different styles, and then slowly but surely you find your groove.
Very cool. So I was looking at your Instagram and I saw some infographics, and I really liked the sayings on the little words, the blurbs.
Oh yes, okay. Yeah.
And I read one that said, when the desire to heal outweighed the fear of pain, I found a way. What does that mean to you?
Whew. So for a long time, similar with meditation, my resistance is strong. Like I want to kind of go into denial. I want to disconnect. I want to pretty much do anything else but feel what is. That's kind of been my personal habit over the years. And so in the beginning of doing self-work and stepping onto the healing journey, those beginning years were really tough for me because I didn't have a part of me that I did the self that has that desire to heal, which I think is a more authentic part of us that is separate from our experiences, separate from our identity, which means anything that conditioned us to be who I am, right? So when my authentic self started to match up with that pain self, that trauma self, that's when the desire grew. And I was able to actually commit and actually know this is what I need. The resistance can't win anymore. And so now I've seen it like this scale that's just balanced. And then now my authentic self is growing past that identity self or ego self, whatever a person uses. There's tons of different words. Our ego, our identity, our trauma, the past, the memories were now not going to stop me from expressing myself and actively working on myself. And so now it's just a total way of life rather than a struggle that I felt I was having before.
So how did you start?
I started in my own personal rock bottom, which I was sharing this quote a couple weeks ago quite often, and it's from J.K. Rowling. And she says, rock bottom was the foundation I built my life upon.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I love that so much. And for those that don't know, she was living out of her car before she became a billionaire. and such a successful writer. So that just resonated with me completely. I had so much pain that I wasn't attending to, that I wasn't accepting or even acknowledging. And so I just kind of blew up my life in a way that I didn't realize at the time was on purpose, but I can see now that it was. And I set myself on a path, and they call it the dark night of the soul, when everything in your life is being questioned and knocked down, and everything that I had been using to distract myself was gone. And it was such a blessing, but so painful at the same time, so scary, so confronting. And then, it was such a small step, but like I remember specifically making that first step of being like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I can't live like this anymore. I want to treat myself better. I want to treat others better. And then that's when ultimately Vipassana was the reason I really I say this often about my second 10-day. The molecules in my body changed, I changed on such a molecular level through that 10-day because I was so ready and I had chosen it. And I think that's such a crucial part of the journey, where a lot of people think they should heal and they just get told by people and they get kind of guilted into it, and it's not really going to work. It's just going to feel like it's a grind until that choice is clear. So that's one of the main reasons I can do this work with people, is that I came to the point where I knew and chose my own path, and I give that honor and respect to everyone else. I don't want or need you to heal. You either choose it or you don't, and that's not about me. And I would never enforce that or try to push that on somebody. Right? So it has to be an individual choice. And that's been a game changer for my own life and then also my practice. Because I think the biggest hang up for any therapist or coach or anyone with friends or family is I want you to heal, God damn it. Yeah. That reflects something about me. I need this for you. And from my own family to clients to friendships to my partner, I work consistently on allowing it to be, their choice and accepting where they're at.
Isn't that so funny how we tell ourselves that we want it for the other person when it's 100% about us?
Exactly.
Not like 90-10, it is 100%. Sure, you want the best for the person, on a very general level, but it's man, if they sorted that out, my life would be easier in this, aspect.
Totally. And, I have compassion for that, because I do think it comes from a very childish, child place where there's something our child self was lacking, and this would make it better, right? I just kind of discovered something about people pleasing from, many people might know this Instagram name, the holistic psychologist. She's always posting great information for anyone who doesn't know. And she said basically that people pleasing is from a neglected child going into the fawn trauma response, which is people pleasing, because the child wants to help the parent get better so that the parent can help them. Right? It's not because the child is so loving and caring for their parent and they just want to help them. No, it's a survival mechanism. The child instinctively knows, if I help you somehow, then you're going to be better and be able to help me, because I'm the one in need. I'm the child. But we can trick our brains to be like, okay, but maybe if I help you first, then you're going to help me.
Yeah. And also, so I was having this conversation with someone the other day about people pleasing because they said that they were a people pleaser. And I think that the formal definition, or the definition that people tend to think of, where it's like the story that the people pleaser tells themselves is, I am so caring, I will put you first. And the truth is, again, it has nothing to do with the other individual and everything to do with the quote unquote people pleaser. And I think that's a really powerful viewpoint, because the story is also like, they're so selfless, they're so, take the shirt off their back or whatever. And it's actually the exact opposite. It is perfectly contrary to that.
Right. Well, here, this is the way I really try to level it out, level up the playing field. So, from Joseph and Lynn, so we don't have to go into that backstory, but they would do communication seminars, and they would talk about the ego and about how there's the top dog and the underdog ego, right? And we have, depending on our experiences, one person might praise and think the top dog ego is the one, right? Like, that's the one to be, they're the best. And then the other one is going to praise that underdog ego. Ultimately, neither are better or worse. They're on the same field because they're both in an ego state. They're both coming from pain, conditioning, and memory. They're not present, they're not awake, they're not really engaged in any adult manner. So I look at this the same with trauma, because fight, flight, freeze, fawn, many people have zero compassion or understanding or even like for someone who fights, right? It's many people. I mean, there's still people that would praise that person over the others, but a person who's in a fight trauma response gets so much heat, so much judgment, so much, oh, they're an asshole, whatever, they're this, they're a bitch. Yet it's the exact same premise. It's just a reaction to pain as the fawn people pleaser. None of these reactions are better than the other, yet we categorize and label as victim, saint, or evil monster. And so this has helped me personally, especially with work that I'm doing with people, to not judge. It's coming from pain. It's not who you are. This people pleaser is not who you are. So trying not to label yourself as, I'm a people pleaser, right? Like, sometimes I people please would be a healthier way to go about that, because proclaiming proudly that I am a tyrant, or I am a people pleaser, or I am weak, or I'm fearful all the time, or I'm fearful. It's really getting enmeshed in how we view ourselves as an identity. So when I talk about the mind or the body, I use it more separate from me so that I can be more objective.
Now, the payoff is so huge to taking that approach. Like you said, the person that fights, it's a different sort of payoff, but the people pleaser victim mentality, if you can get somebody looped into that cycle, the payoff is huge, which, maybe it's potentially harder to change due to the societal setup and just a numbers game, because there are so many people that fall into that category, at least that believe that they fall into that category. So how do you help people to start shifting that perspective? Because when they have that belief and it's solidified, it is tough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. this is kind of reminding me of yesterday. I knew I saw this or witnessed this for a reason, but I was at the stoplight, and to my right, I had been driving, and this truck came weaving through traffic like a crazy person. Like, whoa. Like, and you could just tell it wasn't about needing to get anywhere. It was just like rage. Like, you just needed to like have this outburst of energy, and kind of just forgot about it. But then we all stopped at a light, and the person that was behind him when he was weaving got out of his car and went and confronted him at this guy's window. And next thing I know, I don't know what was said or anything like that, but the next thing I see is this guy gets out of his car, and he is just fire, like fuming. Smoke is literally coming out of his body. He is so stressed. Like, like I just felt it, and maybe I am probably very empathetic, but I just felt like the misery of that this person is in, that it has nothing to do with this, anything that he projects it on day to day, but that he's actually addicted now to the stress. And we are addicted to the endorphins or whatever chemicals go off in people pleasing as well, right? It all releases certain hormones, and I don't know all the science around it, but I know that we are addicted to that response in our body. And I know that primarily because of Vipassana and sitting with my body for days on end and recognizing how much certain pain memories, sensations, certain parts of my body could just send me whirling and spiraling into something of distraction, or wanting to leave, or wanting to get up, or wanting to scream, or wanting to cry. Like, being able to sit there with it is a huge part of retraining myself to actually observe what I'm going through rather than react. So yes, the belief is so important to confront and say, hey, you want to change that belief? Because that can happen somewhat on a mental level, but the deepest root work is on a physical level. We can change that belief on a physical level in your subconscious mind, in your subconscious memory, which lives in our body. That's when we're truly transcending, not even transforming. We can transcend some of these personality traits.
Okay, so I want to give people a personal example because it came up in this breathwork class the other night. So I go into this class, we lie flat on the ground on our backs, we get guided through this thing, and there were maybe 10 to 12 other people in this dome going through this experience as well. And the guy is getting us to breathe, exhale, inhale, whatever, and we can do it at our own pace. He recommends going slow, but we do it at our own pace, and we can essentially just start that way. And this woman to my left, every time she is breathing out, she's being super animated and making a lot of noise. And so I start to get annoyed. And I feel the annoyance just like boiling up. And I say to myself, she needs to stop doing that because I'm annoyed and everything is about my annoyance and I don't want to feel that annoyance. So she needs to alter her behavior. And I felt it in my bladder. And as I just sort of sat with it, I felt all this tension in my bladder. And as I'm sort of playing out this mental story, mental thought process in my head, I know logically that it was all about me. And this woman was actually an amazing teacher of mine in that moment because she's bringing this annoyance to the surface that was already there to begin with. And as I processed the annoyance, it turned into anger. And then, the bladder, my bladder started to act up even more. The reason I bring up that example is because it was there all along, but this woman, this experience, this breathwork, meditation, call it whatever you want, brought it to the surface. And then I had the opportunity to either be like, fuck that chick, she needs to stop acting the way that she's acting, or capitalize on the opportunity, right? Because this is perfect opportunity to process that stuff, and the body never lies.
Exactly, the body never lies. An amazing book around this is called The Body Keeps the Score.
I have.
Yeah, it's pretty popular, and it really, I had already had a lot of maybe these ideas, but that book just set me on a new path and solidified this in a way that I am so passionate about. I recently completed a course called Compassionate Inquiry, and that's the whole premise of that is a psychotherapeutic approach to healing. And the whole premise is that our memories are stored in our bodies, and we have to get past the conscious mind to recognize what that trigger is triggering. The conscious mind wants to blame it on this person, that person, this event, that event. And we have to actually recognize that trigger and then follow it down the rabbit hole into my body and figure out what sensations is this bringing up that's connected to a first core wound pain memory. And really sorry everyone about this, what's it called, lawnmower. But I wanted to look up ladder because I have this book.
Oh, it's my favorite book in the world. You Can Heal Your Life. Corniest title ever, favorite book in the world. So the bladder is all about releasing old ideas. I already looked it up. The bladder is all about releasing old ideas, anger, being pissed off. And funny enough, I reference that book more with my clientele than any nutrition, biology, physiology, endocrine system book. Like, that is the book that I use with my clientele. And I use it for myself even more because we talked about how the body doesn't lie. Whenever I'm experiencing something, I go to the book to find out what that thing is. And the way that I choose to approach it is, instead of thinking, no, that doesn't apply to me, because the tendency is to be like, no, that's not my fucking issue. Like, I go to a place where it's like, not does it apply, but how does it apply? Does that make sense?
Yes, of course. Yeah, I do that with dreams, actually. I love dream work and reflecting on dreams and wondering what could it be symbolizing, what could it be trying to teach me. And yeah, I do the exact same thing with my body. People might think we're crazy, but like, even if I stub my toe, if I, it could be totally accidental, I am going to check and see what is going on, because the physical manifestation of it is the last stage. So mental and emotional happened already. And that just means that I'm not late in the game if it's happening physically now in alerting me. And so this is also a sticky subject, because I think we have a hard time understanding this idea or accepting this idea, because people don't want to feel blamed for their illnesses, for their injury, for anything that happens in their life. And I totally understand that. And I also, for majority of, or a big part of my life, I was like just racing away from any type of blame, right? I was so filled with guilt that I didn't even know I had, that anything that looked like blame, I was going to run. What I realize now is that it's not about blame. It's about accountability, right? And I think those two things are very dramatically different, because ultimately there is no one to blame. There is no one to blame if you really follow that down the rabbit hole, and you understand trauma work. Because there's a great book that I haven't even fully read, but I've heard so much about it. It's called It Didn't Start With You. And it really goes into the science of epigenetics and understanding how ancestral trauma gets passed on. And if you really consider that, and consider that people aren't cruel for no reason, people aren't abusive for no reason, like, that hurt people, that this has been happening for cycles and generations, and I don't have anywhere to pin it. Where do I pin that? I can't blame anybody. So I don't blame myself, and I don't blame my parents, and I don't blame my grandparents, and I've let go of the blame game because it's futile. But wow, accountability has changed my life. Being accountable for my experiences and saying, what could this be trying to show me? What could this be trying to teach me about my family system, about my family history? Whether it's genetic and a genetic predisposition, it needs to be triggered by the environment, right? So a lot of people, especially in the medical world and science and everything, kind of just like wants to just talk about genetics, and that, oh, that's a genetic disorder, that's a genetic thing, genetic. But I believe from my course with Compassionate Inquiry and Gabor Mate, who was a physician for 20 years, he said that yes, it's partially genetics, but genetics have to be triggered by the environment to actually activate.
I've said on the podcast before, genetics load the gun, environment pulls the trigger. So so basically you could have all the genetics, quote unquote genetics in the world to be overweight, but if you dial in your lifestyle, it simply cannot happen. And so there's a massive amount of power or empowerment in that. Thing about, I talk about accountability and ownership in regards to, nutrition and lifestyle stuff a ton on the pod. And I find that approach really, I identify with that approach because it puts the ball in my court, and I like that, So how would you recommend that somebody start to reframe, that blame, accountability, ownership conversation? Because it is tricky. It's tricky because it insinuates all sorts of other things down the line, especially when you look at like physical ailments and stuff, because, you say, well, you need to be accountable. And then someone's like, well, I have an autoimmune condition. Are you saying that it's my fault? Like I asked for it? So how does somebody begin to reframe that and actually make that concept work for them, as opposed to feeling like they're being put upon?
Well, I personally refrain from saying you need or you should. Like, I don't tell someone what they need to do. I tell someone that this is what's happening, and accountability would potentially heal this, or accountability will help you. And you have that choice. You have that option. But the real magic ingredient, Marcus, that I have found is compassion. Compassion for myself, compassion for my upbringing, compassion, like looking at it compassionately, really understanding, wow, I was a child when some of these things happened. To really look at myself as a child, and I don't think many people do that enough, or if ever. There's such a disconnect between our child self and now our adult self. We somehow think that they're two separate people. they are not. We are the same. And our childhood is so much more present than people realize in our lives every single day. Um, Joe Dispenza, who I really love, his research shows in neuroscience that 95%, by the time we're 35, 95% of our thoughts, feelings, actions are subconscious. And our subconscious mind is from 0 to 5 years old. That's the age range we're working from on a consistent basis.
So from 0 to 5 is where the subconscious gets set. And then what is the 35-year-old digit? How does that work?
By 35 years old, your programming is 95% in place in the subconscious mind.
Oh, okay, perfect. I'm 34, so I'm good to go.
Yes, I mean, it's a real thing that it's a lot easier to do this type of work up until around this age, around our age. I'm not saying that it's impossible to do that work after, but it just gets slower and thicker and harder for a lot of people because, again, I do think it's scientific. It's our patterning is so set in place. And so working with the body, right? Because some people have zero memory of their childhood. And I totally like empathize with those people. So I tell them, you don't have to remember any events of your childhood. You don't have to go back and like write things down and like really see the memory and visualize it. You have this memory in your body. So if you are connected to your body and you are sitting with it, doing body work, breath work, meditation, hypnotherapy, if you're doing things that actually go into that subconscious mind, into the body, you will heal. So I think people get scared of like, I have to remember all that shit. And I'm like, no, don't.
That's the beautiful thing about the body. And I love nutrition and movement and sleep and all that good stuff for that reason, because I look at it as like a door in. So whether you start with, doing therapy or you start to dial in your nutrition, the same issues are going to pop up. You're just going in, a side door versus a front door versus a back door, which is so cool because you have multiple different avenues to access this sort of stuff, and you don't have to choose one. You can choose one, or you can choose 3 of them and attack it from all sorts of different angles. Like, I find it a really empowering approach, like you mentioned, that you don't have to remember because your body keeps the score, is that book that we talked about. But it's just so much, less overwhelming from that place, I find, for myself at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that because we are so physically dominated in this like world and society, I think it's a really tangible place to start for people, because this work can feel so obscure and very, hard to grasp, hard to see, hard to understand. The more fresh or new or green you are in self-work, the more spiritual work or any type of ego work is just going to seem like gibberish, right? So I love, and that's where I started my journey, was in fitness and nutrition and that realm, and learning what I could do, how I could manipulate my own body through my own intention and my own accountability, as we've talked about. That's when I was like, oh, I'm not set in stone, right? Like I'm adaptable, I'm malleable, I can change. And that's what I truly, one of the main things I want to offer any person day to day is the potential for change, that they can feel it just by looking at me or just like by sitting with me, that I'm emanating, that change is happening. Change is, whether you want it or like it or hate it, it's happening. Because we're changing all the time, no matter what. And the more I dig my heels in and try not to change, the harder my life becomes. And I've been there. So it's not just words.
That segues perfectly into another little infographic that I saw on your Instagram, which was, if you're convinced it's supposed to be easy, you're never going to do shit in this life. which I loved. And it's that sort of ties in with, the should, shouldn't, need not, whatever. But what does that statement mean to you?
Yeah, I was feeling feisty that day.
Yeah, you were. I like it.
So when I say do shit, it's not necessarily like a job or a career or any type of, when we normally think of doing shit, we think very externally, very traditional in terms of what's your status, what's your label, how many letters behind your name do you have, kind of thing. That's part of it, right? Like, we're here to express ourselves, we're here to create, we're here to make shit happen in a lot of ways. I think that that's exciting about life. And even if you're a monk on the mountain, you're making shit happen in that way. But there's a state of mind and body that I've been in where I was so stagnant. And I tried multiple things, whether it was a career or some type of self-work, or maybe it was a sport, whatever it was, that I was like, I'm going to do this now. And it wasn't easy right out the gate. And I wasn't like so super talented in it immediately. Then I would give up. I would just stop, because I was one of the people that was convinced it was supposed to be easy. And I wasn't doing shit.
I think you were doing a lot of shit, just nothing really well. But it's funny that you say that, because obviously we've known each other forever, and I was watching you jump from thing to thing to thing to thing. And from where I was sitting, it was just a matter of time until you dove headfirst into this work.
Yeah.
But you almost had to sort of like busy yourself until you were like ready,
Yeah, it's similar to a person who like knows maybe they found the one, but then they're like, I'm just gonna go hang out with all these people first.
Just gonna date like crazy, have a bunch of sex, and then eventually I'll get there.
Yes, exactly. It was truly me resisting and being afraid of the intimacy that I feel in this work, and the passion that I feel, because most of the time we're not afraid to fail, we're afraid of the passion and the success that we may have. I firmly believe that. And I was afraid of success, and I was afraid of being great. I was afraid of maybe multiple aspects of that, the isolation that it may bring, from other people, even family members, but also the fear of any type of loss of that thing that I dove into, right? That I now dove in, gave everything, gave all of me, and in that surrendering state. And now if anything happened, what then, right? If it didn't go a certain way. So I was playing coy with careers and with doing shit for a long time. And I used to brag about being like a Jill, literally a Jill of all trades. And it's still part of my personality. Like, even in the work I do now, I have so many like different things that I like to offer and include, like a tool belt, but I do feel it's all focused. And my focus, and I know I'm kind of going off into tangents, but my focus is bridging the gap between science and spirit. If I were to sum it up in terms of what I'm truly goal-oriented on and passionate about, it's that I see a disconnect and a void between the science world and the spirit world. And they're the same thing. There's no difference. And it's like saying, nature is spirit and science is nature. I mean, it's all the same. You can look at it also with the mind and body, trying to separate those two things as if they're separate, trying to separate men and women. Like, we have this very dualistic mind and brain and outlook in life. And I know that's been, formed through history, but we're ready for a change. Like, it is truly time. I think it's already been evolving in so many ways, but I want to be a part of that evolution in a big way, and really be a source of unifying those things and ending the taboo or the kind of the war, and to not be dramatic, but like it feels very warlike. I've been saying for a few years now, there's been a war on emotions that we have been taught for years that emotions are the enemy. And it has caused so much systemic illness, sickness, depression, anxiety, the most powerful mental experiences that we have. I refrain from calling them disorders, or even illnesses, because like I said before, and I think you've agreed, is the genetics with the environment piece, that I don't believe it has to be this set in stone, this is what you have, this is who you are forever experience. Like, it is a reaction to environment.
Yeah, I like what you said about bridging the gap between science and spirit, because I see my work as sort of the same thing. And it's been fascinating to be here in Tulum, for example, in Mexico, because this city is a very quote unquote spiritual place. Now, you have these two extremes though, because some people come here to, sort of lose themselves in the spiritual work, meditate, do yoga, do all these, breathwork classes, stuff like that. And then other people come here to just like party and do a ton of drugs. So it's got this fascinating sort of, there's this dichotomy to it. Now, the reason I like the bridging the gap thing is because I think both are great, and there are people that are overly materialistic in the sense that I'm not even talking about like things and money and this and that. I'm talking about like, if they can't physically see it or touch it, they literally do not believe it exists. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there are these over the top, airy fairy, up in the clouds, like quote unquote spiritual people that you literally can't even have a conversation with because they are out to fucking lunch. So bringing these two things together, I think, is so valuable, because it's like, oh, okay, this person, takes accountability, reads between the lines, looks at how acknowledges their spirit, their mental, emotional, physical health, but then also like, works hard and puts a roof over their head and like, acknowledges the physical aspects to life that need to be taken care of too. Does that make sense?
Of course, yes. And it's the only way, balancing both extremes is the only way it's not going to be so pigeonholed, right? Like the engineers, because I work with a lot of them, the engineers are pigeonholed to one extreme of, like you said, black and white, no intangibles. This has to make sense, right?
And like then math.
Yeah. Exactly. And then the other side is, yeah, I've experienced it. Believe me, it's hard to speak to, hard to connect with. It's not on earth. So I really love the idea of incorporating spirit, like grounded spirituality, is another term for it that I've heard, which resonates for me. There was one thing that I wanted to say about that. I was going to say that I was in a class in college, I remember, and it was a speech class, and we could talk about anything that we wanted. And I did a whole speech and presentation on androgyny and the power of androgyny, and not necessarily, people instantly think of it physically and the dress and the way a person's style is. I'm talking about psychological, emotional androgyny. And psychology even says an androgynous person is a healthier person. Like, and androgynous psychologically, not again physically. So I believe that. I think it's, the Buddhist way of the middle, right? Where when we find that balanced place and we're harmonizing these dualistic ideas of life, which are the yin and yang of life, that everything is created through those energies of the energetic spiritual and then the physical matter of life.
Just for someone who might not know what that term means, can you define it?
Yin and yang?
Androgynous, androgyny.
Oh, got it. Yeah. So, well, you have masculine and you have feminine, and androgynous and androgyny would be the balance of both, where you're not either in any extreme sense. And mostly we think of that word in terms of our style, and I think that's just a very indie way of approaching it. To me, it's really a personality or a more of an identity it's a tool. Like, I can use androgyny to communicate, and when I'm more androgynous in my communication, I am so flexible. Like, I'm strong, but I'm flexible. I can go anywhere. I can talk to anyone. I can read the room. I can read the human being in front of me, and I can know what approach do I take here. Because sometimes I need to be more receptive and open, and that's more of the feminine side that the androgynous person can tap into. Sometimes I need firmness. I need direction. I need to be really assertive in my approach, and that's the more masculine side. So androgyny gives me power. I think it's a superpower.
It's interesting that you mentioned the harder, softer approach. I'm sure that you find this with your clients as well, but I'm curious. I find that some folks are a little too hard on themselves, and I need to sort of reel them in and reel them back. And my approach is much, quote unquote, softer. And then there are other people that are just let themselves off the hook at every turn, and I need to push a little bit harder with those folks. So it's like identifying what is required in the situation, and then providing that is sort of what coaching is to me, or what a good coach is, at least. Is that something that you've come across too?
100%. There's many people that don't do this. And again, I think that's because they're either stuck in one mode. And whether you're hyper feminine or hyper masculine, you're not listening. That's the problem. If I'm stuck only in my feminine approach, then I have one channel. So how could I'm just going to keep listening and acting and speaking from that channel, and it's going to be limited to what I can offer. And I think, a lot of people fall into one or other category and even take pride in that. And that's where I think we get hung up. It's not about taking pride. It's all just a tool. these energies are tools for us. They're not who we are. So that really helps me tremendously with clients, is being able to use different tools and approach them in a different way. That's why I do think I can talk to anybody. I used to have more fear around maybe people a lot older than me, and now I don't have fear around that either. I just feel like I can definitely communicate with anyone. Doesn't mean that I'm going to be the right person for them, but I know I can listen. I know I can listen and meet them on a certain level.
I think that's so key for coaches, but also just people communicating and relating in general, because if you sit on one side of the spectrum, you automatically alienate, let's just say 50% of the population, right? And so if you can sit in the middle and, like you said, access and use the right tool for the right job, given that certain circumstance and situation, it just opens up so much more for you. Not just in business and being a coach, but also just in like connecting with people,
Connecting with people, getting a job, family situations. That's the potential. To me, the fundamental problem is how unhealthy it becomes for that individual's health when they're in that extreme side. And I don't, all we hear about is toxic masculinity, but there's toxic femininity, and we don't talk about that enough. And that is when a person may be really stuck in that people pleasing, right? Really stuck in passivity and in I can't move, I can't get up, I can't, depression is to me an outcome of extreme feminine energy, like too much feminine energy. And so it can be very toxic for the individual experiencing that extreme and not being able to see outside of it. And for the masculinity too, you see and now we're seeing it in plastic surgery and steroids and all these things trying to be hyper feminine and hyper masculine, which that's having its own, not saying it's all bad or wrong, but to the extreme, it's having really negative consequences for people in an extreme way.
So if someone identifies themselves, they're like, shit, okay, I fall into one of those categories and I think that I'm too far to one side or the other, how would you recommend that somebody maybe implement just like a little practice or something to be like, oh, I'm hyper masculine. Like, how can I access some of that femininity so I can, come to the middle, or vice versa?
Yeah. So I really focus on emotional expression, because I believe that any extreme is an outcome of repression. So if the hyper feminine person, again, this is not gender related, can be a man experiencing hyper femininity as well, then that may mean that they are repressing rage, anger, something more forceful from coming forward. And so that repression is causing an imbalance and causing them to be hyper feminine. The hyper masculine person may be, and this is all just, there's so many different combinations of what it could be, but the hyper masculine person may be suppressing sadness, vulnerability. So knowing what femininity is, the receptive, open, more sensitive, knowing what the masculine, feminine both represent is the first stage. Because then you can see, okay, what do I not experience? That's what I'm repressing. And then slowly but surely see how I can implement moments to express rage in a healthy way, or express sadness in a healthy way, express these different emotions in a healthy way. That's going to bring us back to balance.
Yeah. And for people that are wondering how to express those things, for myself personally, lifting weights is actually an amazing way to express rage. And then if I feel like I need to access sadness, music really, really does it for me. Specific music, I'm able to access it. So that just gives people a little bit of an example of, you can use different things in your environment to access those things. You don't have to just like sit there and be like, now I feel angry because I want to feel like that's really hard to do.
Yeah, like having a paper and pen. And I know you're a journaler, so that's another one, because you can access anger, rage, like sadness, hurt, jealousy, a lot of different things with a paper and pen. So for sure, breath work, meditation, again, those are the really obvious ones, but you are, even through breathing, through sweating, through anything that's coming out of our body is expressing an emotional energy as well. So, coming back to this breathwork class, that woman was purging in her own, maybe over the top way. She was purging something, and could be partially, ego driven, but ultimately that expression, it needs to happen. It needs to happen, no matter if we're like facing embarrassment, or it looks awkward, or it looks, it's scary. It's always scary to express in an authentic way, or express in a way that people aren't used to. But our health really does depend on it.
Yeah. And to bring this full circle, I went outside and I was standing by this little pool that had this really cool Hamsa art piece on it. And these two girls walk up, and I turn around, and one of them was the girl that was making all that noise. And she was so sweet. Okay, first of all, like nicest smile, just very kind. And she goes, oh yeah, I was experiencing these different things, like blah, blah, blah. Like I had this like pain right here. And she points to her bladder. And I was like, what the fuck? And I was like, me too. And then I started explaining this sort of stuff. She was not only reflecting me and teaching me in that moment, but also experiencing the exact same thing. And at first, all I felt was fucking annoyance, anger. This chick needs to, cut it out, whatever. And that moment, it just it really showed me, like you said, she was processing her own thing, and it just happened to sync up perfectly with exactly what I needed at the time. And there was this sort of synchronicity in that moment that was, unexplainable, but also just so cool.
I love these stories, and it is, to me, the perfect example and reflection of two extremes coming into balance. You were more, not extreme, but you were more on the side of masculine. She was more on the side of feminine, and you both, and the processing of ideas, right? Gender is an idea. I'm sorry, many people are gonna be like, what the fuck is wrong with her? Gender is all of these identities are an idea. Yes, we have biology. Yes, we have parts. I get it. But the way we see gender, the way we label it, the way we categorize it, the way we think it should be this way, that's an idea. It's not the reality. It's not how it should be. It's just how we've decided it's gonna be. And we are in the process of needing to, whether you do it or not, it's up to you, of course, but it's happening. Like the world is changing. These concepts and labels and categories are changing. And I'm a believer that being open, not necessarily, doing your thing, everyone having the choice to do their thing, but being open that these dualistic black and white ideas are not the way it is. It's just the way it's been in our minds. We can do magical things because now we're actually using our imagination. We're using a part of our brain that is more creative and more in the mystery of life, in the unknown. But as long as I keep believing that I know everything and that everything should be a certain way, I'm a fucking fool.
Okay, that is a perfect place to wrap up. So if folks want to find you, your work, all that good stuff, where can they track you down?
You can reach me on Instagram. I think that's a good place to start. It's Danette Torgeson, my full name. And yeah, you can message me privately, DM me, and we can go from there.
Perfect. I will link to that in the show notes. And thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. You are an amazing interviewer. I felt very comfortable and relaxed, and you're a pro.
Oh, thanks.
That is a wrap on today's episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. And if so, let me know if you want Danette back on the pod or you want to hear more episodes like this in this personal growth space. Let me know because I love this shit. It is fascinating and I'm always digging in and learning more about it. So let me know. Also, if you're interested in applying for one-on-one nutritional coaching and or workout design with me, you can click the link in the description below or head on over to n1fitness.com/coaching. Follow me up on Instagram at N1Fitness, on TikTok at the N1Fitness, and feel free to friend me on Facebook at Marcus Sadu. Muchas gracias to the folks that have taken 15 to 30 seconds out of their day to leave a review on their favorite podcast platform. I so appreciate it. That's how this information gets out to more folks. Lastly, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, I hope you found this useful, and I will catch you on the next episode. See ya.